You know, there's nothing that I love more, nothing that I love more than brand new Tudor models being released. These are the new Tudor Rangers, and this is our first look. Welcome back to Time on the Wrist at Chisholm Hunter. My name is Harrison as always, and today we were sprung upon by the new Tudor Rangers. There's 3 variants, and actually I think these are quite good looking watches. I think they're tool watches at their core, and I think it might have been filling a gap with what Tudor were missing. They were always quite bold and quite big with their styles, but maybe they needed something a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more understated. And I think this is where these Rangers fit in. These Tudor Rangers were launched today to mark the 70th anniversary of the British North Greenland expedition. And full disclaimer, I don't know enough about these watches yet to form a true opinion. I literally just got my hands on them as they were released today. So I'm just gonna go over all the specs, what you need to know, and then we'll make another video later down the line of my opinion and what I think of them. Each of these models has a 39mm case, which is pretty slap bang on the money. I'm not going to lie. I feel like there's a trend where watch brands are getting bigger and bigger, but for slimmer guys with slimmer wrists, it doesn't really fit. And I do enjoy 39 to about 42, and as soon as it gets to 42, I kind of tap out. So I'm a big fan of this kind of smaller face size. And even though it's smaller, it doesn't really have a bezel, and that gives it more face diameter, if you will. It has more dial real estate, and that makes it quite easy to read. They've kind of fitted the dial out really nicely with the numerals, with the sort of hands and indices, and it is very easy to read. This remains a tool watch at its core, and that's the theme that it's going to carry through into all the other specs of this watch. The metal used on all 3 of these models is of course stainless steel, and it has a satin brushed finish. Now, one thing that I would love to see from Tudor, and I think would be really cool, especially with these more outdoorsy watches, these more sort of tool orientated watches, is a titanium version. I think the titanium would play wonderfully against that kind of dark aesthetic, and it's just something I would love to see. The water resistance in every single one of these models is 100 meters, which is more than you will ever need. I'm gonna be honest, I have a diving watch sitting at home that goes to 300 meters, and I've never dived in my life. I've had that watch for 2 years, and I just haven't used it. So it's one of those features that's nice when you have it, but you don't need it. So I think the 100 meters water resistance is comfortable, it's nice, it's what you'll need. The glass on this model is sapphire crystal glass, and it's actually domed sapphire crystal glass instead of flat sapphire crystal glass. I'm gonna hold this up to the camera and actually press Drew isn't here, so I'm having to do this myself today. So take a look at that glass just there. It looks quite domed. Can you see it? It's quite raised off the top. And I'm not gonna lie guys, I do prefer slightly flatter glass. It's just my personal preference. I do feel a little bit on edge when I have domed sapphire crystal glass. I don't think that's a bad thing that it has it, but I just prefer, personal preference states that I like flat sapphire crystal. Before we move on to the dial and also the case shape and the crown and all the nice little details that I've noticed, it's important to say that Chisholm Hunter are actually authorised retailers for Tudor watches. Head to chisholmhunter.co.uk to shop any in the collection. Let's dive straight into the bracelet and strap options. So the one that I have in my hand is actually a hybrid rubber and leather strap. And I'm not gonna lie, this is probably my least favorite out of the bunch. I do prefer the NATO strap, which comes in a kind of khaki green, red and beige. I really like that NATO strap, but my personal favorite, I have to say it, is the steel bracelet. Tudor really nailed their bracelets, and this is no exception. It looks brilliant. And I think that, you know, a NATO strap or a rubber strap or whatever it is you put on a watch can totally change the aesthetic of the watch. And I just think that with the steel bracelet, this looks epic. Moving quickly onto the crown before we get into the dial, which is almost this matte black, beautiful, simplistic dial. I have to say that I'm a fan for simplicity. I think that a lot of watches nowadays overcomplicate things, and they don't get back to the roots of just telling the time and doing it honestly and simply. And I think that Tudor have kind of rewound the clock and gone back to that point in time. And that's why I'm quite a big fan of this watch. I like the simplicity. But I'm rambling. So the crown is actually perfect. And I know that I have a lot of gripe about crowns either being too big, too small, too hard to turn, too prominent, but this is honestly perfect. It's notched perfectly, it unscrews just like this, pops out, and you can wind up the movement. Now we'll get onto the movement in a second, but that ensures a water resistance of, as I said previously, 100 meters. Before we go into the face, if you enjoy these videos and like the Chisholm Hunter channel, make sure you subscribe right now. It is one click away and we would really appreciate it. Moving straight into the dial, these have a black matte dial, and the numerals and also the hands and the indices are extremely prominent against that black, and it goes back to the roots of just simply telling the time and doing it well. And I think this watch does that. The Superluminova stands out beautifully when you shine it in the light. Drew is not here, so I won't be able to do that today, but I will in the next video I do about this watch. I'll show you that. And also, one detail that I love, more than the lume, more than the big numerals, is that splash of red on the second hand. It's just a little taste. It's not too much colour, it's just enough to really pop out, and I'm a fan of that. Something to say before we move on to the movement is that these models also sport a clasp rapid extension function, which makes it really, really easy to extend that clasp or that bracelet, which is a really useful detail, especially if you're like me and have slightly skinnier wrists. It really, really helps. But anyway, let's get on to the movement of this watch. The movement of this watch is the manufacturer caliber MT5402, which is fully COSC certified and in-house from Tudor. It's a self-winding mechanical movement with a bi-directional rotor system. It has a huge 70 hours of power. To be honest guys, I haven't spent enough time with these watches to form a true overview, to get an honest opinion of these watches. What I'll be doing over the next couple of weeks is putting them on my wrist, trying them on a little bit more and researching a little bit deeper into them, and then releasing another video in the coming weeks, the coming days. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode of Time on the Wrist at Chisholm Hunter. If you have, please hit that subscribe button and we'll see you on the next episode.